G'day, it's Joel Rasmussen for Southern Cross Combat, and I'm here at Absolute MMA in Collingwood talking to Mr. Simon Carson. Simon, first off, thank you for the time. I know it's a Monday morning. Thank you for letting me be in the gym. It's always appreciated. How are you this fine Monday?
Yep, very good, thank you. Not tired, as you've been alluding to. Yeah.
Seem low energy, but that's fine. You don't always have to be high energy.
Morning. It's Monday morning. There you go. So
How was your weekend? Tiring weekend?
no, not too bad. Sydney lost the footy, so not real happy with that. But anyway,
Why the love for Sydney? Because Jack Jenkins also likes Sydney.
well, I think he's the same. I was South Melbourne supporter, and then followed him, stayed with him.
Fascinating. You know, we're trying to paint more of a 3D picture of the man. That being said, here's some MMA questions. We are ahead of Rogue MMA, holding its sixth event, I believe. I hope I counted correctly.
You probably know better than I would. I'm not sure. Yeah, but let's go with 6 if you say so.
It has been a hot minute since the last Rogue event. Why come back now?
To be honest, didn't really have an ambition to run a show. Look, we wanted to do one earlier. It took a while to get our permits through to this one. We've obviously tried to do everything properly and wait for the permits before we went ahead and did everything. But yeah, look, we probably just see that we just struggle to get everyone matched, and there's just not that many available shows in Melbourne. Everyone's doing their thing. Like obviously, we do have Hex and Demolition and Hex, Demolition, Ascension's amateurs only. Demolition's probably only 1 or 2 pros, and then Hex. You know, we're lucky to get 3 or 4 on. Because we can't obviously be one side of a whole card, so we have a number of pros that we need to get matched. Unfortunately, we're not having a lot of luck matching them on our card, to be perfectly honest. We've got 1 matched, but we'll hope to get a few more and then sort of keep that going. I mean, Bushido, previously Dennis was running Bushido, and then that sort of gave another option, but that I don't know that I think Dennis is wised up and might not be running them anymore either. So it's just an absence in the market of because I think Hex does 4 a year, which doesn't leave a lot of alternatives. Of course, we'll travel to all the other cards, like go to Eternals or wherever we get invited to, basically. But when you're the out-of-staters, you're obviously not as high priority to get matched as when you're trying to, as the home show crowds.
How does the decision get made we're going to run another Rogue? Does someone come to you and say, hey, we should do Rogue again? Do you go, it's about time we do that again? Like, how do you literally make the decision we're going to do it again?
It was probably more me saying to Dan, hey, we need to probably do another one. We also had like an altar program finishing up, so we would have needed to put those altar guys somewhere. So then we ran like a fight camp thing. So we'll have a fairly sort of good sized novice undercard, which is good sort of, I suppose, to feed into the system. It's that first stage for a lot of people. So I think we'll have 9 or 10 of those fights, which makes like a sort of a bit of a foundation for your card, which doesn't put the same pressure to be able to have to match. Ideally, we'd love to run the format. Our format on paper should be a 6-6-6. So 6 pros, 6 amateurs, 6 novice. Looks like we're going to have more novice than 6. We'll probably have about the 6 amateur fights. I think we've got 4 of the CMBT guys coming down, so we'll have like a reasonably strong amateur undercard. At the moment, we've only got 1 locked pro fight with 2 or 3 pro fights pending, but we've always struggled to get the 6 pro fights, so that's the reason why I'm running the show, and it hasn't really come to fruition yet.
You mentioned it there. You mentioned it a little bit earlier, and something I've heard talking about Rogue with other people. You ain't necessarily the biggest fan of being the promoter. You like being the coach more than booking it all. How has it been for you? Is it like a complete headache booking it all?
Look, to be honest, Dan Herbertson probably does most of the work, and Dylan's actually been helping with the matchmaking as well. So, look, I'll make suggestions to them on the matchmaking, and pretty much most of the time I sort of nominate, like I would with a normal show, I nominate like the absolute guys and say, try to find these guys opponents. We'd love to get more nominations on the other side of things. And we definitely want far more fights that don't have an absolute person in it. That we want it to not be seen as like the absolute show. It's definitely not meant to be the case. But we do struggle to get a lot of nominations. We're trying to match for looked like we were going to get Kit Campbell to defend his belt, and we looked like we had someone from overseas lined up, but he's on Hex now, so unfortunately we probably took a little bit long to get him an opponent, so missed out on that one. So we have a few interstate nominations, but we've tried to get them matched locally, and then even actually I think on the amateur card we've got like 4 interstate versus interstate for amateurs, which it's probably not ideal, but we'll see how the card pans out. We're happy to fly people in definitely for both amateur and pro.
So that Kit fight, he's not going to be pulling double duty?
No, unfortunately not. It is what it is. Yeah.
I know you said you try not to make it like the absolute show, but is it a thing where you've got people in the gym of all levels, but if we're talking about pro, where you're just like, all right, well, everyone's kind of peaking around the same time, everyone's ready, let's try to get everyone booked all at once?
Oh, look, in theory, it would be fantastic if I could get, a card with, 16, 18 and get 12 or 14 of my guys, because it'd be probably might save me 1 or 2. Like, if you compare that to putting 2 fights on 5 interstate cards, shit, it's a lot easier to have, 10 guys on the one night in Melbourne than having to go 5 or 6 interstate trips to get those same number of people onto cards. So, look, from a conveniencing, 100%, it would be fantastic if I could get as many matches as possible. But unfortunately, it doesn't always work that way.
Not always how the cookie crumbles, unfortunately, sometimes in this game. I know you mentioned that you're not, I can't remember the man's name, Dan? Yeah. Dan Herbertson is kind of taking care of that a little bit, but do you come into these and in your head, if you're nominating someone, do you think like maybe this would be a good fight? Like you think of an opponent for them, or are you like just find someone for this person?
Look, a bit of both, to be honest. So we'll put open nominations up on our socials and say, hey, we've got these people nominated. Let's get some on the other side. I might, with the pros, put like a list of 10 people next to their name saying any one of these would be good, but don't limit yourself to those. We actually get a lot of overseas nominations because I think people want to sort of obviously can we get a trip to Australia, but they don't always they're difficult to make sometimes, and then there's a whole question of credibility things when they do come out. So but even if they do have a good record, sometimes it always doesn't match up to what you get. We had some overseas nominations for like Joey and stuff that were like on paper good, and then you're looking, they're like 4 weight divisions out of where they should be, and you're like, I can't really make that fight. It's not. What probably the frustrating thing is that the fights where you go, this is a fair fight, this one should happen, doesn't. For one or both sides don't take the fight, and then you've got on the other side where people shouldn't be wanting to take a fight, asking for stuff that they probably shouldn't be taking. It's funny. You'll get people that say yes to fights that they shouldn't, and then the ones that, from an outsider's point of view, I'm like, well, that's a fair fight. Why wouldn't you take that? And then people say no for whatever reason. So that's always a surprise, like an eye opener to me. Yeah.
Of course, who could forget? I know it wasn't on a Rogue show, but Raja Shippen's opponent, who failed to make weight and then escaped somewhere into the country and was just kind of gone.
Yeah. Well, funnily enough, one of the ones that actually nominated and was asking for a fight was because Raja had Rana Singh that did the runner and still talks absolute bullshit about what happened, but said, no, he definitely left, and then he then after doing the runner, I think he went out to train with Hoshi at Kings, and they became best buds apparently. Raj's previous opponent before that, Rex or whatever, I think. Oh, I can't actually probably say, but he obviously came, and on weighing days he found out he failed the blood work or whatever. Well, he re-nominated for the show, and I'm like, that was actually funny because it's like, I know this guy has this, stop trying to send him. We know he's going to fail his blood test. So, so that's probably another example of nominations of stuff that you get. So, anyway, but we've had a lot of interesting nominations, put it that way.
Talking about upcoming fights, and a man that got brought up just before, Jack Jenkins, his fight has been announced, locked in for Perth, Gavin Tucker. Yeah. What do you make of that fight, and as Gavin as an opponent?
Look, he's obviously a really high-level opponent. Like, he's fought a number of, sort of highly ranked people. he's fairly well rounded. He's a black belt. He's got fairly good grappling. Southpaw. Like he's pretty well rounded and pretty good everywhere. It's hard to get an gauge on exactly where he's at because his last 2 fights were against Lopez and Ige, who have obviously just main evented last week, so they were very good opponents. And they're his only 2 fights, I believe, in the last 4 years. And then, he had a very good winning record in the UFC up until that time. But he's been in the UFC for a long time and hasn't had that many fights, so he's obviously had a lot of injuries or been injury prone. He's now 37 or 38, so actually I believe he's 38. So it really, you haven't had a great look at him in his last 2 fights because he got caught by Ige basically in the first exchange. But a lot of people have been caught by Dan Ige, so there's definitely no shame in that. And then Lopez basically jumped a triangle off his single leg entry and got put straight in the triangle. So yeah, it's hard to actually know exactly where he's at because that's his last 4 years of footage. He's at kind of like 1 minute of tape, and then previously had some really good wins against Billy Q, and he's put on. He's put some very good displays on in previous fights. So, we're expecting like it'll be like probably Jack's highest level opponent that he's got yet. So, yeah.
Kind of infamously with Jack, or I guess it's not infamous, might just be famously, the Benny P story of that. That like Benny P went and studied heaps of tape and found like anything and was like, do this. You mentioned there that there's not a lot of footage on this guy for the past 4 years.
Yeah.
When you're, especially at the UFC level, are you someone who's going back and watching like heaps of footage?
I've watched all these UFC fights, obviously. But some of them are pretty old. You know what I mean? Like the Billy Q fight, he was very good. That was 2020, which is not that long ago. And I still don't think people change stylistically that much. It's probably, I'm all too aware of age-related decline, so we just don't know how much that will be a factor, or so we can only we can only prepare on what we see in front on those tapes. But which I see a pretty good, well-rounded guy. There are some things for Jack to exploit, I think, but it's he's going to be a really good fight.
How is Jack? How is his arm? How has he been recovering with that?
His arm's been really good, actually, so I don't think that's almost sort of long forgotten. I'm sure he's got other niggles now supersede the arm, so yeah, as part of this. But yeah, no, he's pretty good and he's in good shape at the moment.
Fighting is such a thing. Through my time being around it, I've noticed it's such a momentum-based thing. Wins. You stack them, you build that momentum. The record will show that that's a loss for Jack. Yeah. However, people who were there and people who have seen it know there's that asterisk there. Just from your perspective, not for him if you've noticed it or just in general, your thoughts, does kind of like a freak loss like that derail something? Is he taking that like it's a real loss? Like, what are his kind of thoughts on it, if you've spoken about it, and what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, look, it is an interesting one because it was a fight that his first round against Shepe, who was actually then went on to have another win post Jack, and then he was going to fight Dan Ige, obviously when Ige moved forward and took Lopez on short notice or whatever. So Shepe was obviously moving up. Jack's first round against Shepe was probably his best round in the UFC. So it's a little bit hard to go, he started so well, like it was looking really good. And then, and to be honest, he was absorbing a bit of pressure on the fence, but live, like in there, it felt like Shepe was getting, tired and everything was sort of going really well to it, didn't. So, should he have separated early? Like you do. Yep, possibly, but there's obviously you hear lots of people going, "Oh, why did he even absorb the pressure on the fence?" It's like, well, Chepe looked like he was throwing his last things and looked like he was getting tired, and then had like a Hail Mary throw, and Jack posted, and the way that his elbow went was a bit of a, should you post like that? Well, maybe not, but I've also seen that happen 500 times in training and be okay. It wasn't like it was overextended. So there was obviously a fair bit of force in that throw, but I wouldn't say you'd go away from that fight and then go, we need to rebuild everything. You know what I mean? It's not like you're getting pieced apart and then got finished with 8 minutes into the fight. So I think you still take what was working as really well and then obviously make a few adjustments from that. But yeah, it is a funny one. It does obviously break momentum, in terms of it's now been like over a year now that he'll have off between fights. Not that he needed that year, like he's been ready to go for a long time. It's just been a matter of trying to get him on the card. So it's definitely obviously broken momentum, but I wouldn't it's not one of those ones where you kind of walk away and go, well, shit, we just found out he's not up to that level yet. It didn't feel like that at all. So, yeah.
Sure, there are people who are saying he should have done this and shouldn't have done this, but that's why they're the armchair experts, and you're the guy who's actually in the corner, you know?
Yeah. Oh, look, you know, it was a technical mistake that he probably made there, but, you know, we don't all fight, you know, technically perfect fights 100% of the time. And the way that his elbow dislocated is extremely unusual. It wasn't like a hyperextension. It slid out, like, you know, but, yeah.
I don't know if you'll remember this, but after that fight, I was there for that fight, and just as I got back to the hotel, you, Raja, I can't remember who else. Might have been Alistair, but I don't know if Alistair was there. There was a third man there, and it wasn't Jack. But you guys were just on the street corner, like right out of my hotel. I said, "G'day to you," and you guys went on. So how was he right after that? Like, I've never dislocated anything, but was it like put it back in and now you're fine? Like, how was right after it happened?
Well, he was pretty drugged up and pretty happy, actually. So he went through, like, obviously just emotional after, like, you know, on that stuff. Yeah, of course. So, yeah, I suppose as you'd expect, you know, he went through the highs. As soon as he hit the green whistle, he was pretty happy and quite chatty with everyone around. And then, then he obviously was in hospital. Everything sort of the real, like, I suppose reality kicks in. And then I still remember he was in emergency and had someone, like, from 2 cubicles down come in while he's still in a fair bit of discomfort, ask him to send, like, a video message to their mate or something. So that's what I remember most, is like that sort of stuff. But yeah, no, look, he took it as well as, you know, he was like, oh, I fucked up, you know, and then he did that and moved on. So yeah. So it took, like, Jack's pretty good, like, headspace wise. So he took it pretty well and moved on pretty quickly.
I suppose that's all it really can do in those moments.
Sulking doesn't really help, and he didn't really do too much of that. So he was kind of like, oh, well, fucked up.
As you said, it wasn't like a demolishing. It just kind of happened.
I don't know if that makes it harder, like, you know, harder to take or easier to take. You know what I mean? Like, obviously different in how you treat it and how you prepare for the next fight, but a fight where you feel like you're clearly winning to then drop it, or one where you're going, well, I was going to lose anyway. I don't know. You'd have to ask Jack what's easier to handle. I think neither of them are good scenarios. But I think it probably feels worse at the time to go, fuck, I had that, you know, and then it's taken away from you. Yeah. Whereas if you've been pieced up for 8 minutes and then dislocate your arm, you're probably like, oh, well, fuck. Yeah. It's not, yeah.
Talking about that and you telling that story about someone recognizing Jack and asking for a video. He's a man who pops up in my ads often. I'm often scrolling and it's like, oh, there's Jack promoting something. How is that? Because there are some people in the UFC who don't, like, being UFC fighter doesn't inherently mean you get the brand deals and you get all that. And you're someone who's obviously spent time with him before all that. For you, how is that? Where it's like someone you train, who you're also then you've got the friendship relationship with as well, is like kind of famous and people are like going up to him. Like, how is that for you?
I wouldn't have said he's kind of famous. Maybe Jack thinks that, but no.
You can take that clip if you want.
I don't. Yeah, that. I suppose that's not really a thought. I suppose. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to actually think of him as, respectfully, Jack, as famous. You know what I mean? I always think that it's such a niche sport that you kind of like. We'd always joke with Craig Jones about, but he's a really big deal to a really small amount of people, and it's a slightly less smaller group of people, but it's still not mainstream, you know, like mainstream. I mean, that's always changing with, you know, with the guys sort of as time goes on, but yeah, I don't think that's really a factor. Jack's still the same guy, and everything else is still the same sort of here. So yeah.
You mentioned about he's been ready to go for a while. I heard him mention, like, on his social media, he was looking for May. Do you nominate for May? Do you say, hey, we're ready to go, and they tell you no? Like, how does that work, and why not May?
I don't want to get Jack, like, I don't want to cause any grief, but I don't probably I don't have a bad relationship with Sean, but I'm probably not at the top of his list of like when I email Sean Shelby, he goes, "Great, it's an email from Simon. We better get back to that one." So like I had been emailing to say, "Hey, we're ready, good to go." But Jack's now got a real manager, so now he's on a card. So so Jack's I believe now with Tim Simpson. So he'll probably get more regular fights and his emails returned now. He's got a real manager. So I was sort of like, I don't think he really returned. Yeah, I think the UFC has a lot of fighters on their roster that they're trying to get through, and it was obviously hard to get him on. But I think we'd sort of been ready kind of since originally we were looking at March, and then was a little bit sore a couple of times, but then it's been really good since sort of April, May. So, but they booked him a long way out, so it's not necessarily that easy to to get on a card these days, even if you're on the roster. So yeah, and the featherweight division's probably a pretty stacked one as well.
I asked you about Rogue and when you nominate people for that, when you tell the UFC, yep, Jack's ready, do you have an opponent in mind, or do they come back to you and say Gavin Tucker?
We definitely hadn't nominated anyone for this one. So I think previously you've looked around the rankings and said, here's a few. I'd ask them sort of like what, because you also don't want to go, here's some opponents, and they're like, who the hell are you to tell us who you're going to fight? Yeah. So it's pretty much, but I'd asked originally and said, did you want us to send through? And he's like, by all means, send them through. It doesn't mean that so we've in reality, we've never had any influence on the opponent that we've got. Again, that's probably my influence as a manager, 0. It's just been whoever's been put in front of him. I mean, I think obviously he tried to get Nate a couple of times, and then that didn't come through. And then some other guy had called out Jack for Gabriel, the tall, skinny Brazilian dude, grappler, had called out Jack, and then Jack sort of accepted on socials and they went through. But then the guy was actually unavailable, so it was the weirdest call out ever, where it was like they both basically agreed to fight publicly, and then Jack said, yeah, sure, let's do it. And then Gabriel Miranda, I think that was who had called Jack out, and then but then we went back, and then that was like he wasn't available. So, but we'll see.
As a coach, when you have a fighter who's ready, I know you said March may have been a bit too early, but still you kind of look at May. And you've got a guy and you're ready, and you're like, all right, we want to get back on the horse, get the weird loss behind us, and you're getting told, no, wait. Is that like particularly frustrating? Like, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, we didn't really get told no way, to just crickets. Didn't really know what was happening there. It's just hard. I suppose it's hard to know when to. It's fine to say just stay in like a skill development cycle and keep training and keep fit, because once you sort of get to that level, most of the guys want to focus on knowing when they're going to get ready for. So that part's a little bit tough, but you kind of go, well, we can still work on deficiencies or whatever in that time, like break falling, and then just I suppose then work to get ready for the next show. Yeah.
Now going from a fighter under your tutelage who's in the UFC to someone who was just slightly out of it, Lisda Kyriacou fought on road to UFC, lost a split decision. What were your thoughts on her performance in that fight?
Look, so there's the winning and the losing part. Obviously she lost, so that's not great. She did. We're trying to get her more aggressive because she had possibly, being straight with, like, she was winning boring sometimes, and that's also a factor. I think, at 7-1, there's probably not too many girls that rack up 7 pro wins and don't get signed. So finishing fights and going after it and being a bit more aggressive was also a focus for this fight, which I think she really did. Her defensive grappling wasn't great. Like, she got taken down a little bit, but her striking looked better, and so there was, pros and cons with that performance. Obviously, looking at a really strong, like a 24-4, or I think now 25-4, very high-level opponent that had been on contenders that, was smashing their opponent in until she got beaten on contenders, and that Korean Silver's, I think, now 5-0 in the UFC. So, look, that girl's obviously at the level that she'd probably face in the UFC, and she showed that she was very close to that level. So, disappointed she didn't get the win. But there was also positives. to her performance, and then so it's again highlighted some things that she needed to work on that possibly haven't been exposed in other fights. Like, I don't think it's a pro. I could be wrong, but I can't really remember it being taken down. So, I think she's sort of been the one initiating the grappling, and with this girl being quite short and strong and a good wrestler, we kind of went, well, we'll try and stay more striking. And I think that opponent, listening to her post-fight interview, she was obviously thinking that Lisa was going to try and grapple her as well. So it was a bit of a change up to try and do that. But yeah, and Lisa did well in terms of getting back to her feet and not getting into too much trouble when she got taken down, but still showed that she's going to get exposed to good wrestlers in the UFC. So it'll be something that she needs to work on. Yeah.
Kind of like what we talked about with Jack and the arm, where you don't know if it's better to be winning a fight and then that happen, or losing a fight and then that happen. A split decision. I don't know if there's an exact answer to this question, but just, do you think that, like, I got a split decision, lost, like, is that even that, or is it still like, no, it's a loss and it's not good?
Yeah, look, I think it's a loss. Like, I don't know that. Look, I thought the other girl won, probably. So, like, I don't sit here today going, Lisa got shafted in that. Like, I didn't. And to be honest, I'm probably also viewing it we're on road to UFC in China against a Chinese opponent. I definitely didn't expect to be getting that decision when it was being read out. And when I went to split, I was like, look, Lisa definitely did more damage. If you look at the two faces after, but that's not how fights are scored. She got taken down multiple times, and the girl got a fair bit of control time. Lisa definitely did more damage and looked did a lot more work on the feet, but the other girl got a lot of control time. So I don't think it was a bad decision, and so therefore I wouldn't sort of put an asterisk and go, oh, it was a split, we were so close. She needs to change things from that performance. There was a lot of positives. She made good steps forward, but there's still stuff to do after that fight. Yeah.
I think her striking looked incredibly developed, especially from where we've seen her the last time she fought. Just between those fights, it looked fantastic. And I think a split is an indication of it wasn't a blowout. Of course, there is no exact answer, but just from your perspective, does that reset her in the eyes of the UFC? Is that like you climbed to the mountain and now you're at the base of the mountain again? Like, where do you see her in terms of that UFC contract?
Look, I don't think her stocks probably went down. You know what I mean? Like, Lisa was brought in, I think she was obviously brought there to be cannon fodder. like I think that was her role, and she probably did put on a better showing than what they had thought, because they probably thought, well, I even listened to the opponent, that she's going to try to take her down. That girl's got fairly good. She's quite short, strong, and stocky. So I think that girl probably backed herself to keep it on the feet and beat her up. But obviously, I think Lisa sort of flipped that and did fairly well on the feet. So no, I don't think she's back at the end of the pile. If anything, I would say, who knows exactly how they see things, because you don't really get a lot of feedback. But I would have thought that kind of shows that she's there or thereabouts. If this girl had been on contenders, did well, was probably earmarked for a return, and then Lisa had a fight that close with her, I think. And she also fought in a probably more exciting manner than what she previously had. So I would say they probably know that she's at about the level. And if she gets a couple of wins, she should look to get back in, hopefully, or get another opportunity. Yeah.
And now going to the opposite end of the spectrum, the return of two-time Diellon Lihari. Yeah. How excited are you for the return of two-time?
Not at all, actually. Couldn't be less interested. No, I'm joking. Sorry, he's just over there. No, it's great to see him back in there and giving it a crack.
When he...
Because he's over there, it's going to be awkward. Anyway. Yeah, it's such an honour to be in his corner.
Wouldn't be caught dead saying anything nice about him. I talked to him just before. He kind of gave me his perspective and how the fight came to be. Obviously, the decision to go away is ultimately his, and the decision to step back is ultimately his. But when he was back in the gym and he was back training, was there a specific point where you went, I think Diellon can come back and then go pro?
Look, Diellon, it's always been whether he wants to fight or not. You know what I mean? Like, he's definitely up to going pro if he wants to go pro, or staying amateur or doing whatever. So I think he just, I think he doesn't see himself as a career fighter. That's probably, he just wants to do it and have some fun. And but he sort of trains, and if you're training and you're fit and you want to do it, just do it. I think like he probably doesn't do quite as many sessions as some of the pros do, and he doesn't want to make that. He definitely doesn't see that as his career, but he's young enough that he can, if he just keeps going and keeps doing skill work and getting better and takes the odd fight as he goes along, and then he decides at 27 or something, 28, he wants to give it a crack, then he's actually probably got a foundation that he can do it. So that's probably, with Diellon, is kind of what I'm thinking. Don't do something stupid that will prohibit you from having a career if you decide that you do want to do it properly in 4 or 5 years. So, just taking fights at the level that he's at, so not stepping up to do something stupid and then destroying your record, and then you decide later. Because there's some people that do take, that don't think of it bad as a career, and then in later life want to make it the career, but they've done some irreparable damage to their record, and it's hard to come back from. So, you just don't want to see him do that. But apart from that, he is free to do what he likes.
Going from someone who ESPN asked you about to someone that ABC Politics has probably asked you about, Sam Miles is fighting at the end of the week. What are your thoughts on his matchup with Max Kelly and that fight?
I think it should be a good fight. Max is a good opponent, pretty well rounded as well. So I think they're both purple belts, both sort of got decent striking. So it should be a good fight.
I also talked to Sam earlier today. I've spoken to him a few times. He's talked about different kind of goals with his career. He's a guy who isn't necessarily driven by like this belt and then do this and then do this. Yeah. And he talked to me about kind of beginning to develop that. You talked about a Diellon, a man who may not approach it at this point in his life as this is it, all eggs in. How do you view Sam? Is Sam in a similar boat like that, or do you see Sam as someone who wants to really pursue it?
Oh, look, Sam definitely does want to pursue it and get, like, Sam's goals would be to get to the UFC as well. Whereas Dillon's not necessarily that goal. He's just fight and see what happens, but it doesn't mean... Sam's also, like, 4 years older than Diellon or something, so that makes a significant difference on the planning. Sorry, I just was going to jump on.
Two-time just walked in, and so he got a bit starstruck.
Yeah. So, that's it. Different age, different sort of goals and so forth. And Sam's probably, if Sam wins, then he'll go sort of 3-0. And probably with Sam's connections, he might not, have to build as big a record as some. That's not meant to be crack. I mean, that's the reality of it. He'll probably receive more media attention as he goes on than what other people would in similar positions. That's a reality. I don't know. Would Sam get annoyed me saying that? Look, that's probably a reality. But I think Sam's good enough to do it on his own, without any of that stuff. But, whether that becomes a reality, it will probably be more newsworthy than other people. If he's 6-0 or something like that, he'll probably get a little bit more attention.
And I would like to talk about Semakade Kakembo. He lost a very close decision to Jarrett Wilbraham in his most recent fight. How is Sem? How has he taken it? How have you been after that? How is he?
Look, obviously he's disappointed. Probably, I think, disappointed because he probably feels it's like one that got away. He probably, didn't go after it enough to, early on. I think probably the way that he fought in the third round showed probably what he should have, could have, would have done if he has that fight again, which probably won't happen. So, look, he's disappointed. And then, because Sem's a guy that sort of could be, he obviously lost a split decision to Abdullah on 10 days' notice that I think, possibly could have won. I think probably, looking at those decisions, I think the Abdullah one, he probably maybe I thought he probably did enough in the first 3 rounds. I think Jarrett was a very close 1 and 2, and then he obviously dominated the third, but he should have done more in the early one. So we're not like other sides where we sit here complaining and accusing judges of being paid off or anything like that, which seems to happen a bit. But yeah, look, so he's just one of those guys that could, he had a close fight with Colby up on the Eternal, so he's now 6-3, but his 3 losses are 2 splits and one where he had a very dominant round with Colby in the first, and then Colby obviously came back well and then ended up getting a decision. But it's a funny one. Sammy could probably be 9-0 or probably 8-0 and a draw or something, if things had slightly gone different. So again, it's like how much do you take out of those losses? Well, it's probably more a pacing when he needs to go from the last fight. But yeah, he's disappointed, but he took it fairly well, and straight away was like, he's not a guy that ever gets on and complains or makes excuses. He takes it on board and then starts to try and go put more work in. So look, we're almost going to get him on Rogue for this one, but it's probably just a little bit quick turnaround, and he's off training in Thailand at the moment, and then off to Bali to do some training with Khan. And actually, I'm meeting those guys there to do some work there, and then he'll be back, like I think, sort of end of July, and then look to relaunch. He'll probably try and get on the next Hex or on something. Yeah.
Funny you bring up Khan, because it just reminded me I wanted to talk to you about Khan. Obviously, you're in an interesting position because the show's been filmed and you've spoken to him and you're his friend.
Yeah.
And so I can't ask, like, how is he doing in the house? Because you've seen it and and X, Y, and Z. But just in general, because I don't know if I've seen anyone ask you, your thoughts in general of Khan getting on The Ultimate Fighter.
Oh yeah, I was stoked for him to get on, to be honest. Because originally he wasn't going to apply, and then I think actually Jarrett, the rumours of Jarrett getting on was enough to make him apply. I think so. So he probably needs to thank Jarrett for that. Yeah. So look, it was great for him to get on, and obviously his first fight's been on, and he had a really good performance. So it's a weird one. You can't obviously say anything, and of course Khan wouldn't tell me anything. So yeah, look, he's obviously got another fight in the house that's happened, and then he'll go. Yeah, obviously we'll know more after that one.
So he's moved out to Bali at the moment, and he trained here for a long time. You build that relationship. This isn't a question designed to. It's not about beef, but how is that relationship? Because when I spoke to him, he's still repping Absolute. Yeah. When he fights next, wherever that may be, he's gonna bill himself Absolute guy. Yeah. How is that? Because obviously the skills that he learned here, he's taken with him over there. Yeah. How is that just in general? How he's repping Absolute? Do you still consider him an Absolute guy?
Yeah, look, I still do. So I still talk to him quite frequently, and obviously, I think Khan did an interview, but when the list came out for Tough, I wrote him game plans for each of the guys to sort of go in, and I think that worked really well in the house for him. And then, at least for the first fight that we've seen, and then, look, obviously I'm going out to see him actually after Beatdown, so I think that's next week. So I'll go spend a bit of time there, and hopefully he can come to train a bit in Melbourne as well. Look, it'll be I'm more than happy, of course, to have him representing and will be in his corner for whatever. But yeah, it'll be. You want to obviously spend as much time with helping people get ready for a fight as possible. Like doing spreadsheets and setting training plans and all that is still no replacement for being in the room with someone. So you just hope that he's getting good support where he is, and that that we get some time together for each fight. So if I get 3 or 4 weeks with him in each camp for any fights moving forward or something, that's in that sort of 6 to 2 weeks out sort of thing, that'll probably be enough. But whether that's I'll do whatever works out best for Khan in the long term. I definitely don't think he's got any plans to move back to Melbourne in the short term. It'd be great if he did. But I suppose I'll kind of see, what the future holds on, how he goes through there and then what's next for him.
We've talked about a really wide array of people at all different levels. We've talked about someone who's in the UFC. We've talked about someone who's on the doorstep, someone who's making their pro debut, people all over. Yeah. For you as a coach, this is something we've talked about before, not in an interview. How do all those things compare? When you're walking out in China on the road to UFC, how do those feelings compare to when you're walking out with Jack at a sold-out Perth arena compared to walking out someone on their pro debut at Club Italia? Yeah. For you, what are all those different things like?
It's all similar. It's all you're just hoping that whenever you've prepared them right, and that what the game plan that you've put together is working. You're hoping to it's always just about them and hoping to get them into the prepared right headspace when they're walking out. All those sorts of things. So it's all quite similar. All the rest is just sort of peripheral. It's not really a thing. I mean, obviously noise in getting your message across in different venues can be, but you can still have that at, as you say, Club Italia for an amateur debut where the screaming's out loud, they can't hear, but it could, The only place that's probably significantly different, I reckon, is Japan. Like remember like Jack Jenkins at Ryzen when you've got like, I don't know, I think Tokyo Dome was 70 or 80,000 people, but it's like complete silence and your voice echoes when you're like giving instructions. That's probably the only time I've ever been self-conscious where I'm like, you know, man, it sounds like the echo here is crazy. Hope I don't say anything stupid. So yeah, look, it's all sort of like it's not the same. I mean, the feelings are similar though. You know, you're still nervous for your person no matter what. It's probably, you know, like you obviously build such a relationship with the people. It's like, you know, like your kids going in the fight. So you've got all those things about hoping that they do well, don't get hurt, etc., etc. So, and that doesn't change on the level. Yeah.
You said it there that it's, you know, the fight's ultimately about the fighter, and that's where the focus is. And I understand that in the answer that you just gave. That being said, I will ask, when you're walking out, I use that example of Jack at like sold out Perth RAC. When you're making the walk, are you like looking around, like looking at all the people? Are you like, man, there's a lot of people in here?
No, not so much, to be honest. No, like, that's probably not. You don't really notice. I mean, I normally look at Jack taking it all in because Jack obviously loves it. Some people love that and others don't. But yeah, I think it's a cool feeling. There's probably parts of me going, oh, this would be cool if I was walking out. But, you know, yeah, it's still probably that. It's probably about the most nervous, you know, you're just hoping that they're going to do well. Yeah. So that's probably more what I'm thinking about, what I'm going to say to them before they jump in, that sort of stuff, not what's, not really the peripheral stuff.
Simon, I thank you very much for the time. I know I kind of sprung it on you, but I do appreciate the time nonetheless. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it.